Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The last flicker of sunlight through the stained glass cast a kaleidoscope of colors across the sterile whiteness of the hospital ward, painting fiery reds and somber blues over aged linoleum and flickering monitors. On this particular evening, the institution felt more like a mausoleum than a place of healing. Silence and the smell of antiseptic reigned except for the faint, labored breaths of one man lying in bed 217. A room meticulously locked and watched by guarded nurses and hospital security. His name was Arthur Madsen, a man whose life story unraveled in tragedy and shadow. An aged figure with a gaunt face, his wild eyes shone with a haunted clarity. Until now, Arthur had been known as a recluse, a forgotten figure tangled in the whispers of a small-town scandal buried deep decades ago. Tonight, however, the hushed hospital corridors held their breath. Arthur had made a confession so chilling that it sent ripples through the very foundation of the city's justice system. Detective Claire Benton sat beside Arthur's bedside, her fingers intertwined as if gathering the strength to confront the past. The room was locked, windows sealed, cameras rolling, yet Arthur vanished. It all began 2 nights prior. Arthur had admitted his dark secret in a shaky whisper, his dry lips parting to reveal the truth he had buried for over 30 years. The murder of Elizabeth Ward, a young woman whose brutal slaying had haunted the town ever since. The local police had long closed the cold case, pinning it on a drifter, but Arthur's confession reignited the investigation. However, as dawn approached, a terrifying revelation sent shockwaves through the hospital and law enforcement alike. Arthur Madsen disappeared from the locked room without a trace. Claire's mind raced as she recalled the moments leading up to his disappearance. The old man's tale was fragmented yet sinister, and tonight, the locked room that should have held him captive felt like the scene of his escape. The story started decades ago in the whispers of Wildwood, a town nestled in the mist-covered hills, where the Ward estate stood like a fortress of secrets. Elizabeth Ward was a bright, vivacious woman, beloved and envied, yet her life was cut short in a violent act before her time. The case had gone cold due to lack of evidence, leaving a shroud of suspicion engulfing several locals, including Arthur, who was known to be close to the Wards but never formally suspected. Now, with Arthur's health failing, he had summoned his courage to reveal the truth nobody saw coming. Claire found herself scouring the hospital room for clues. The monitors were untouched. No forced entry to the room was recorded. The guard stationed outside swore he had not moved from his post for more than a minute. The cameras that should have captured any movement showed nothing unusual, no signs of a visitor or escape. Yet Arthur was gone. The first clue lay on the bedside table, a crumpled envelope. Inside, a faded photograph of Elizabeth and Arthur, their smiles frozen in time, and a note in Arthur's shaky hand. Look beneath the shadows of the ward. Minutes ago, Claire's phone buzzed. It was from the station. A report came in from the Ward estate's caretaker, the old groundskeeper. Something suspicious was found in the family crypt, a chamber beneath the manor sealed tight for decades. Claire's pulse quickened. Could this be the key Arthur hinted at? Was the truth literally buried, and was the old man's confession more than just dying words? The Ward Manor loomed at the edge of town, its Gothic spires piercing the twilight sky. Its reputation for ghost stories and dark deeds made the townsfolk steer clear after sunset. Claire arrived to find the caretaker, Harold Green, wrinkled and shaking, lighting a lantern beside a rusted iron gate that led underground. "What did you find?" Claire asked, holding up the envelope with Arthur's note. Harold swallowed, his voice a raspy whisper. Something wasn't right. The crypt's been sealed tight, but last night, a fresh stone had been rolled in place, new, yet old as the rest. I thought it was the wind or rats, but I took a closer look. Claire shone the lantern into the opening. A narrow passage descended into darkness, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. They entered slowly, the beams of their flashlights piercing the blackness. The walls were adorned with ancient plaques, memorials to the ward ancestors, their faces frozen in stone. At the far end lay a small chamber, its floor disturbed, stones moved, dust scattered. Then Claire saw it, a shallow grave, freshly turned soil over something solid. Nearby, a leather-bound journal lay half buried in the dirt. Claire picked it up and flipped the fragile pages. The entries described a forbidden love, deceit, betrayal, and a desperate plan to protect a legacy. Elizabeth's last diary entry detailed a secret meeting in the crypt, meant to reveal a truth that would destroy powerful people. Suddenly, Claire's radio crackled. "Detective Benton, security cameras near the hospital have been compromised. Looks like a sophisticated hack. We're reviewing now." Claire's hand trembled. Someone didn't want Arthur's confession to come to light. Someone powerful enough to manipulate hospital security and silence witnesses. Her mind flashed to the names implicated in the diary. Back at the station, Claire pieced together timelines, cross-referencing Arthur's notes with employee rosters, visitor logs, and mysterious absences in hospital records. Then she found it, a pattern emerging from the cryptic entries and the hospital breach. A clandestine group operating in the shadows, weaving a web of lies to protect the ward legacy. But what had happened to Arthur? Was his disappearance an escape, a kidnapping, or worse? Claire's instincts told her to investigate deeper into Arthur's past. She dug through decades of town records, interviews with old acquaintances, family members, and police files. A consistent theme emerged. Arthur was a man with secrets, but also a protector. In a dusty archive, she found a torn newspaper article from years ago. A story about a young girl saved from drowning by Arthur, a neighborhood hero in a different era. Another account described threats he received after probing the Ward family affairs. Claire began to suspect that Arthur's confession was not just a last act of guilt but a sentinel's message. A warning cloaked in death to expose the truth and dismantle a cover-up that spanned generations. Convinced that Arthur didn't simply vanish into thin air, Claire returned to the hospital room. She re-examined the locks, the ventilation system, and discovered an old service hatch rarely used, meant for emergency maintenance. Inside the crawl space was a set of footprints leading away from the room, faint but present. Following them, she realized Arthur had orchestrated his own escape to avoid being silenced. Her next call was to the only person Arthur trusted in the hospital, Sister Agnes, a nurse who had cared for him over the years. Sister Agnes revealed a secret passage hidden behind a loose panel in the wall, used during the war to move patients discreetly. Arthur, frail but cunning, must have memorized every inch of that maze. She handed Claire a faded map. Claire navigated the tunnels beneath the hospital, feeling a chill of anticipation. At the end awaited a small, hidden room where Arthur lay on a cot, weak but alive, clutching a bundle of letters. He looked up with a faint smile. "You found me, detective." Claire moved closer. "Why hide? Why confess if you planned to disappear?" Arthur's voice was thin but resolute. "Because the truth must live. The confession was never about me. It was about Elizabeth, about the sins buried in the shadows. I had to be sure the right eyes saw it, that the evidence reached those who could break the silence." He handed her the letters, correspondence between Elizabeth and a man named Henry Ward, her brother, who orchestrated a campaign of deception to protect the family's reputation. The final letter detailed a plan to frame an innocent man, the drifter who had been convicted decades ago. Arthur's eyes darkened. "They tried to bury the truth by burying me. But now you have it." Claire nodded. With this evidence, the town's justice could finally be served. As the dawn crept in, Arthur's breathing grew shallow. Claire held his hand, whispering promises that his sacrifice would not be forgotten. Suddenly, a loud pounding echoed through the tunnels. Heavy footsteps approached fast, shadows flickering under the weak lantern light. "They're coming," Arthur gasped. Claire's heart pounded. She squeezed his hand. "Stay with me, Arthur." The door burst open, revealing men in suits, grim-faced and armed with subpoenas and an unspoken message: an empire's secrets wouldn't fall without a fight. Claire stood her ground, knowing this was just the beginning of a battle between truth and power, but with Arthur's confession, the tide was turning. For more stories, like and subscribe.